and welcome to the Cultivating Careers in Alternative Proteins podcast, which highlights the journeys of how students and early career professionals got into the alternative protein industry, as well as offers advice on how you can start a career in this revolutionary field. This is episode 3, and I have a very special guest on the show today, who has worked at not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 alternative protein organizations, and most impressively has done this all while completing 2 university degrees. Sophia Retchin will be graduating in 2022 with a Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Studies from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from the UNC Kenan-Flagler Business School. During her studies, Sophia indirectly worked for Improved Nature, a company making a versatile, shelf-stable, single-ingredient plant-based meat in North Carolina. Following that, she was a corporate engagement intern at the Good Food Institute, also known as GFI, an NGO which supports the development of alternative proteins. She simultaneously was an advisor to Aleph Farms, an Israeli-based startup making cultivated steak. Sophia later was a brand manager for Piece of Meat, a Belgian business-to-business cultivated meat startup. This past summer, she was a marketing intern for MeaTech, another Israeli cultivated meat startup, which uses 3D printing technology to make its meat. On top of all of this, Sophia co-founded the Chapel Hill Alt Protein Project, which is an initiative started by GFI to educate students on and encourage research into alternative proteins at universities. I am truly amazed with all that she has accomplished in such a short time, and I believe that Sophia's story will inspire students to consider interning at alternative protein companies to start their journey into reshaping our food system. Hello, Sophia, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Just to start off, what really inspired or motivated you to get involved in the alternative protein industry?
Well, I've known since I was about 18 that I want to dedicate my career to saving animals and ending factory farming, but I wasn't exactly sure how. So I started off in animal advocacy and was a PETA representative for my university for my freshman year, but became pretty discouraged after about a year of advocacy. But by the end of my freshman year, I found out about alt protein through GFI and basically just became obsessed with the alt protein field and this new way to take animals out of the supply chain rather than the advocacy route. So that summer, I lived in Israel and interned at an animal rights nonprofit. And while I was over there, I got to visit Aleph Farms lab. And once I saw that lab in person, I really just got hooked and realized this is exactly what I want to dedicate my career to. And then also, I'm from North Carolina. We actually have the highest concentration of pig factory farms in the world in southeastern North Carolina. And so just knowing that this is all happening, just within an hour of me and seeing different sorts of videos online of pigs falling out of trucks going to the slaughterhouse on the highway that I drive on all the time, and literally being able to smell the factory farms while, I'm going home down the highway up to college, just kind of having that more direct experience with it also just really drives me to shift animal agriculture to alt protein.
Yeah, I can totally see that when it's front and center and you can physically see it, it has a much greater impact, and as opposed to something where it's more out of place, out of mind. I think there's a famous quote from Paul McCartney that if slaughterhouses had glass walls, everyone would be vegetarian.
Exactly. There's actually a nonprofit called Glass Walls that's based off of that quote, where they take videos of animals in factory farms.
Could you explain more about your experience and your stories through your various internships at different alternative protein companies and organizations?
Sure. So I found out about alt protein at the end of my freshman year of college. And so by my sophomore year, I was really ready to dive in with some internships. I started off in the alt protein field through a company called Improved Nature. They produce plant-based meat They're a B2B company and selling to other branded companies, but they're based in Garner, North Carolina. And so I first got involved with them actually through an investment bank that they have services for. So I didn't intern directly for them, but did lots of different projects for them, including helping launch their e-commerce store. And so that was my first hands-on experience in the alt protein field. And then from there, I got an internship at the Good Food Institute. I actually had those at the same time. That was when I got very obsessed with alt protein and exposed to various aspects of alt protein and really kind of jump-started my journey. Then I started an alt protein project actually at the same time as those two internships, which is a student organization through the Good Food Institute promoting alt protein courses and research at the University of North Carolina, as well as surrounding universities. Then by my junior year of college, I was stalking different alt protein specific job boards really every day, looking for my next role. And I found a business development internship through Piece of Meat and reached out to them. And they actually had filled it, but they realized that my experience with the Good Food Institute and my other previous experiences on alt protein really showed that I had a broad understanding of the field. So he actually made a second internship for me. And so that's how I got involved with Piece of Meat and was with them for about, I think, 7 or 8 months. And from there, they got acquired by MeaTech in Israel. So I was able to connect with MeaTech and lived in Israel last summer and interned for them.
It seems like it's more of a snowball effect. Once you got one internship, it just led to another and was easier to get the one after that. And it just builds from there.
Exactly. I definitely think just being able to show that you have a deep understanding of the field and not only the one aspect of the field, but being able to show that I had experience in plant-based and cultivated, I think gave me a leg up, especially since hybrid meat with plant-based and cultivated is most likely the future, at least over the next decade or so.
Yeah, absolutely. How were you able to integrate your internships in with your schooling? How did you manage the timing of it all?
Give me a moment to think about this. That's a good question, though.
All right. I was very fortunate at my university where the internship program was integrated into the schooling program. So I would every 4 months alternate between doing a school term and then doing an internship.
That's really cool. I think I was able to balance my internships in school and the alt protein project at the same time because I just had so much excitement for it. So I was really willing to carve out that time, which meant sacrificing time towards other things like going out with friends or hobbies. But honestly, my brain just doesn't shut off from thinking about alt protein, and I needed all of these outlets to put my energy somewhere. And to me, putting in all this time and energy seems necessary because you never know if that extra energy you put in could lead to animals being in factory farming for even weeks or months less than they would otherwise. And I think every potential bit of time in which suffering is reduced is worth it. And as I said earlier, I knew I wanted to work in alt protein by my sophomore year. So I decided to focus more and spend more time on internships and the alt protein project than classes, because I loved how I felt like I was making an impact right now and not only learning how to make impact later. And I was much more interested in spending time being directly involved in the field rather than going to classes that were not related to it. But I have been loving my business classes since I see how those are directly applicable to the field. And in all our practice problems in class, I kind of imagine them being about alt protein rather than what they're actually about, which is typically something very boring.
So most importantly, my question would be, do you feel it was worth it?
Oh, I 100% think it was worth it. I've met so many strong leaders who really believed in me over the past few years and have inspired me to make as much impact as they are one day. And after all these experiences, I feel much better prepared to enter the field in my career. But at the same time, I've honestly faced some major burnout over the past year and know I've overcommitted myself at times, especially when doing everything remote during COVID. But after facing that burnout last year, I started making time to meditate and run almost every day, which has helped my stress levels immensely. And I wish I had prioritized making time for de-stressing a lot sooner. And also looking back over the past few years, I'd probably tell myself to be more fully engaged with the role that you're in right now. I've spent a lot of my time thinking about where all these roles were going to get me once I graduate and thinking about them as a means to an end, but would tell myself going into the field a few years ago to enjoy where I was currently at more.
Fair enough. Yeah. And I feel internship experiences are so invaluable just because you get that exposure that you don't necessarily get in school.
Yes, for sure. I always tell people that I feel like I've learned way more through my internships and through my time at the Good Food Institute doing the alt protein project than I have in school. And while I've learned some really great things in school, especially through my business classes, and I'm sure have some better internal subconscious thought processes that I don't realize that I've definitely gained through my schooling, I definitely think that my time in alt protein has been way more beneficial. That's partially why I've spent so much time with the alt protein project as well, because I would love to have been able to learn just about alt protein during my schooling and would have felt like I would have gotten much more out of it if I had had even just a few alt protein classes.
It's unfortunate that those don't exist yet, but that's the whole point of the alt protein project, is that soon there will be more of those courses offered.
Yes, for sure. I definitely believe hopefully some schools will have alt protein minors in the next, hopefully, 5 to 10 years. And at UNC, we're starting a cellular agriculture course this January. So that's the start. And I'm hoping we'll have a minor in alt protein within the next 5 or 6 years.
Wow, that's awesome. One thing about internships that, based on my experience, is really the true value of them is that you get to try out different roles and work at different types of organizations for a short-term period, and you get to test it and see what you like and what you don't like. So could you maybe explain a little bit more about what your favorite part about some of your internships were, as well as some of your least favorite parts?
Sure. So firstly, my favorite part was working with these entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs within these startups and having their mentorship, especially because I had been seeing different sorts of alt protein news articles about these companies for so long. So actually being able to directly work with those people was just such a great experience. And working with other passionate people really just further fuels my own passion for alt protein. And then I've mostly worked on business development type projects. And I particularly like those types of projects because they give you kind of a broader look at the field or within the company, which I like, instead of having a more siloed off view. And then I would say my least favorite part about my internships, at least in terms of some of my projects, was feeling like my work wasn't directly creating impact in taking animals out of the supply chain right now. I mean, a lot of marketing and business development type projects, especially for early stage startups, aren't exactly measurable in terms of outcome. And really, it kind of relies on you either having faith that your work will be used by employees down the road after the short-term internship ends, or if it's more of a public perception changing project, just having faith that what you're doing is actually changing public perception. But I think that's just inherent to most marketing and business development projects. Is it's hard to really measure the outcome of them in really any sort of field.
Yeah, that's fair. I can totally see that. But business development is such an important aspect of the business because without it, there really wouldn't be business. It wouldn't be able to grow and expand. So it's crucial. And specifically in the alternative protein field, it can be really difficult to sort of determine your specific impact, especially since a lot of the work that you're doing may not directly impact animals today, but it's more of down the road, it could have huge impact.
I agree 100%. Not every role is measurable, and that's just what it is. But of course, ideally, everyone would have some sort of clock ticker that shows exactly how many animals you're taking out of the supply chain each day with your work. But I realize that that's not reality.
I was wondering if you had any advice that you would give to others who are maybe a few years behind you or interested in getting a job in the alternative protein space, what you would recommend they try to do.
Yeah, so I would say number one, take the time to really teach yourself about cultivated meat, plant-based meat, and fermentation-derived meat, and take in this content every day, because the more content you're taking in, the more you'll be able to start noticing how you make connections between different ideas within alt protein and be able to speak about it more fluently. And so you need to become an expert and be able to communicate about it simply, which is difficult and takes that research. So something I like to tell people, for example, is instead of taking a break in the day to scroll through Instagram on your phone or Facebook, put alt protein news apps on your phone like Green Queen or Vegconomist and scroll through that instead, and take that 5 minutes you'd be scrolling through Facebook to instead learn about alt protein. Or instead of listening to music on your way to work in the car, pop on a podcast. So while I know that we're all so stretched on time between the current work we're doing and school and personal life, I think there's always gaps in the day that you can fill with alt protein media rather than traditional media or social media.
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice.
And then I'd also say, don't be afraid to cold email. And you may not get a lot of responses, but you'll get some. And people really like to see that you have that enthusiasm to put yourself out there and pave a path for yourself. So even if an organization isn't willing to create an internship for you right now based off of that cold email, you'll have created a connection for any internship or job posting down the road. And then my last piece of advice is, if you're not able to get that job or that paid internship right now, reach out to different nonprofits and see if you can create a role for yourself volunteering for a nonprofit and do a side project for them. And this can really get your foot in the door in the field and also give you a broader understanding of it as well, that you can then pitch to a certain type of company or a nonprofit for that job that you want.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Or even reach out to them and ask them if they have any side projects that you could work on as well to sort of build your resumes.
Exactly.
Yeah, because definitely having some more tangible experience will help you land your next job. And based on your experiences, it can start the ball rolling for the snowball effect.
Yes, for sure. And I definitely think that my experience interning for GFI, which was a non-paid intern, more of a volunteer role, really gave me that great groundwork to get started in the field, because they're so involved in many different aspects of it. And most nonprofits are involved in a broader aspects of the field, and it gives you more of that baseline understanding.
All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I would say, if you are curious about getting involved in this field, go ahead and just dive in and get passionate about it, because people can really feel how passionate you are. And I guarantee you that if you show people that energy, you'll have a higher chance of getting hired for that position. Because I truly think that people are hiring more really based off of that passion and that drive that you have for creating change in alt protein, rather than those skills that you have on your resume.
Yeah, definitely. Especially one thing I've noticed in the alternative protein field is hiring managers are really looking for someone that's going to fit well with the existing culture of their company. And really showing that passion for this industry really will help you fit in well with the company. And that's really what they're looking for. Even if you're maybe lacking in some of the skills, skills are something you can always develop over time. But a passion or just that enthusiasm and motivation to want to contribute is a lot harder to develop and hone.
Yeah, I totally agree. The passion, it's something you can speak about to a certain extent, but I think it's something that people can really feel and hear in your voice. And so something I do often, which might not be the healthiest thing to do, is I still will sometimes watch videos about factory farming on Facebook or YouTube, and seeing those videos every once in a while really just reinvigorates that passion and creates that drive for me to really work hard in alt protein, and people can feel that.
Yeah, just a reminder of what you're fighting for and what's at stake, unintended.
Yes.
And lastly, did you want to speak more about the alt protein project?
Yeah. So I've actually spent even more time doing different projects for the alt protein project and leading that organization at my university than I have spent on my internships. And that's mainly because, as I feel like I've gotten across in this podcast, is I feel like I would have enjoyed school so much more if I had had an alt protein education. And I am very, very passionate about creating courses and integrating alt protein within existing courses at our universities, because I didn't find out about alt protein through class. I found out about it online, and I became increasingly frustrated that we weren't talking about this in any of my environmental classes or any other class, and it wasn't being talked about at all at school. And I think I would have benefited a lot in my future alt protein career if I had learned about it in school. And I think that the whole entire field will benefit so much more if we have students learning about this, because they'll be able to directly apply those skills learned in class into the field, and also just know about the field, because so many students still don't even know about it.
Yeah, it's a shame that it's a bit of a taboo subject.
It really is. And it's very frustrating that it's still this taboo subject, and so many professors still won't even engage with the idea. I think it really just stifles that curiosity and stifles innovation, not having an open mind to what's possible, at least in cellular agriculture. So I've really been trying to work to break down that wall at UNC, and it's worked, because now we have a cellular agriculture course starting soon. It's been a very exciting process. Our course actually maxed out capacity after 1.5 days of class registration, which was super exciting to see all of that interest from students. So I know that once we start being able to offer students access to this information, there will be that demand, and students are curious about this field, and we want to make impact through our careers. And so giving them that opportunity to learn about this has been really great. And I know that it'll continue on after I leave in May through the students that are currently in the club.
Awesome. I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, and it was something that we weren't totally expecting either, because we hadn't had a ton of members sign up to be part of the alt protein project. But I think having this source of formal education about it will be the baseline for students to be able to jump into this field in terms of spending time outside of school in it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Sophia, for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me and share your stories and experiences and offer advice.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for making this. I think you're filling a big gap in the podcast space.
Thank you very much for listening. This episode was an illustration of how even a student can make a huge impact in this field, and that all you need is a bit of enthusiasm to kickstart your journey. Whether you're a student, early professional, or a retiree, there's no better time than now to begin cultivating your career in this industry, as there's a place for everyone, including you, to be a part of the alternative protein revolution.